Welcome to the Conversation Lab. I'm Don Schaefer. If democracy begins in conversation, then we need to nurture a culture where ordinary people like us routinely talk about those things that help us understand each other, whether it's about climate, race, religion, gender, or politics. When we're trying to make sense of our city and the world we live in, every question comes with a set of assumptions about the nature of ourselves and our place in a larger world. The Conversation Lab provides a safe place to talk about some of those things. This program is produced by CFRO-FM in Vancouver. It's available on air and online on various platforms, and we appreciate the help of Vancouver's community groups. If you're walking along Kitts Beach in Vancouver and look northwest across English Bay, just past Lighthouse Park into Howe Sound, you'll see a couple of small islands. One of them is Bowen. It's an hour bus ride and a short ferry away from downtown Vancouver. Bowen is one of 21 municipalities that make up Metro Vancouver. It's a quiet little place with a general store, a few pubs, some art shops, and lots of trails for hiking, biking, and almost anything you want to do on or in the water. With election signs everywhere, municipal elections are on, and Bowen is no different, other than we don't do signs. We just talk about it. So I caught up to a former Bowen mayor, Bob Turner, who offered an interesting perspective on Bowen, the Howe Sound Biosphere, and most importantly, hope, and the difference a local community can make no matter where you might live. So to start, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Bowen, what you're passionate about, and as a former mayor, and maybe talk to the past, present, and future of Bowen?
Well, thank you, Don. I really like what you're doing here. I really like that you're, hunting around the community, looking for some voices just to sort of create a richer conversation for all of us. The great thing about election periods is that we all start to pay attention. And there's this opportunity, I think all of us, to learn a lot during the election period. So I think what you're doing here with these conversations is really helping us all, be better learners and listeners. So thank you. I'm basically an Ontario transplant. I was actually born in Vancouver, but my dad was in the military. We moved all over the place. I really grew up with a central beacon in my life, which was our family cottage in Algonquin Park, north of Toronto. And regardless of where we moved to, we always went back there for the summers. And that was really the place that I think instilled in me a sort of just a love of nature and wild places, but also, it was the place where our big extended family gathered, and it was like a tight community. And I came to learn just how important small community was to me, and being a partner and part of it, even as a kid where everyone is mostly older than you. So that was a big formative thing for me. I got interested in geology early on. I went to university, did geology at Queen's, met Rosemary, my wife there. We both ended up going to Stanford University in California for graduate work. We moved up to Bowen just because I was, we had jobs here, but really once we were on the West Coast, we were smitten by the West Coast, and we just wanted to live on the West Coast. And it took us a year to find Bowen, but oh boy, once we found it, we just felt like this was like the perfect way to sort of live a West Coast lifestyle. Close to the city, we both had jobs in the city, but in a tight little community that had no end of interesting personality and character. Like one of the first things working now as a scientist with the federal government, Geological Survey of Canada, one of the first things I was able to do back in those days, government was a little more flexible, is that I pulled together a group of people and of other scientists, and we held an environmental science conference for Howe Sound. Never been done before, rarely done for sort of small areas. But I sold it to my management as a way for geoscientists to sort of connect with the broader natural science community. We had oceanographers and soil scientists and foresters. we talked about pulp mill pollution and the old leaky Britannia mine and the environmental consequences of that. And I just learned a ton and about sort of the broader workings of this place we called Howe Sound. And that really galvanized me. And I shifted from my sort of research interests more to education with the Geological Survey of Canada. So when the whole conversation about becoming a municipality here on Bowen took off, and I was a skeptic and voted actually against incorporation. But once we decided, yeah, that's where we're going, I jumped into politics, really, just because I felt it was the right thing to do. It was, I just sort of felt like, okay, time to do some service, Bob. This is a community you care for, jump in, not really knowing much about politics. And I was there in the formative first council where we really were just trying to put the machinery of the municipality together. I chose to sit out the next council. I'd had enough. And then, I reflected on what I saw as really sort of the struggles of the second council. They just had a lot of struggles. And I sort of started to despair with where we were going. So I jumped back in as a mayor candidate, and I sort of won the next two elections and was party to some big stuff. Even if you weren't here, you still hear stories of Cape Roger Curtis and sort of the challenges that was for the community in terms of grappling with this huge development for a small community. It had some great attributes it offered, but it would have meant huge changes. And we had to wrestle our way through that. It was the hardest thing I think I've ever personally done, been involved in. And, in the end, we chose no, as much as some of what was offered was enticing. We just couldn't swallow the big pill. And then, a little bit after that, I, was quite proactive in entertaining Parks Canada to come and evaluate Bowen Island as a possible candidate for a national park, and we went through a big, long conversation about that with the community. I'm quite proud of how we handled that consultation. It was definitely sort of a dividing issue. People had strong feelings both ways. But I think we did the community conversation well. And in the end, the community chose no, didn't want to go that way. And, that may well have been the right decision, though I personally supported the initiative. At the same time, we took on sort of updating the OCP, and that sort of, set sort of a forward look into the future. I retired in 2011 from Bowen politics, 2014 from the government. And since then, I've really sort of just rediscovered myself in terms of making movies about mostly, the Howe Sound region and mostly about our wild neighbors in it. I have a heartfelt conviction for our wild neighbors, and sort of their voiceless circumstance in our own human decision making. And what I have observed, and I think this is really core to who we collectively are in the Atcutsom Howe Sound region, is that when the whales came back to this place, and for 100 years they weren't here, and that's the humpback whales, and to a lesser extent, the orcas also disappeared in about the 1970s, and there was a smattering of them, but they've really come back in the last 10 years. When the whales came back, like the commitment that the human community had to this place took off. It just took off. There was a whole sense of excitement, of pride in this place. And it made clear to me that we need to feel that sort of connection to nature. We need to feel that hopefulness that comes back or comes to us from a healthy nature. That really galvanized me to get involved with the Biosphere initiative. That was a central piece of my work for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020 or 2021, until we had it in the bag and the nomination was complete. But the biosphere to me really captured sort of the whole sensibility of a big, sustaining human community committed to a rich ecology and a sustainable pathway forward with all the creativity that's required to make that happen, and get excited about it, and look for sort of a hopefulness in the fact that we're taking charge.
So where does Bowen fit into this discussion today? Where are we politically and where are we consciously?
Well, I think we could be doing better.
Okay, so go deeper. What's that look like?
Right now, my sense is we don't really have much of an environmental rudder on the good ship Bowen Island. We've got a couple of little bits and pieces of things that, excite me, but in terms of essentially a vision for where we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, a vision for how we hold together this natural space that we so love in the face of a global biodiversity that's in free fall, is just a central question. And I think at heart, we have to become proactive. Right now, to a large extent, I think we're in a sort of either passive or reflexive mode where we just sort of deeply hope that we are going to hang on to everything that is so central to us in terms of the natural space that is Bowen Island. If you look at the OCP, nature is richly woven into our whole sense of who we are. If you look at the branding exercise that went on, I think 2015, 16, 17, and there more recently, again, we sort of see ourselves as this sanctuary, this quiet place, this place we refresh and we reinvigorate in the backdrop of nature. And yet with all that need for nature, that's what's being expressed, we really don't have a proactive plan to hang on to what we've got in the face of all sorts of climate change forcings and sea level rise and warming and fire threats and, a changing ocean. So some of those are just beyond, certainly my ability to sort of comprehend. But what I do know is that, we want to be a resilient community in the face of all that. And resiliency is not just sort of a human resiliency. Resiliency is basically an ecosystem level resiliency where humans are working with nature to hang on and fortify and protect and work with what we've got. That's the game going forward. And so I'd like to see, first of all, a big public-private partnership, or maybe turn that around, private-public partnership between all levels of community, where so much of what is done environmentally is done by individuals, in the spaces that they control, which are, as landowners or renters or members of community groups or parents of kids. We just have so many ways we influence how we sort of live with nature and what we hang on to. So that private piece connected with the public sphere, which is government. And I think one of the dangers is to too quickly go, what's government doing? What's it doing right? What's it doing wrong? Keep me posted. I'll check in 4 years in the next election to see how we did. Not good enough. Not good enough at all. An informed, energized citizenry is the basis for resilient communities. That's what creates good government. It's not the other way around. Good government doesn't create that informed citizenry. So, step one, Bowen Islanders, and we've been good at this in the past, and we got to keep doing it. Step up to the plate, get engaged, get involved. And you can do it in so many ways. So to me, that's the big piece. And if you look at the OCP, in its vision statement, one of the things that it speaks to is an ethic of self-reliance. It's focused on the community, it's focused on government deliverables, but it acknowledges, that ethic of self-reliance. There's a deep libertarian spirit on Bowen, and we need to be tapping into that. So that's the private piece. The public piece And government has to provide leadership. And I think it could be doing better. If you look at the OCP, and that was, 2010. So we're 12 years out. But the point being is that a lot of what was recommended in the OCP, we just haven't got to. One of the things it wanted, it was, essentially an inventory, and it wanted part